Millonario. Volvió a casa antes. Lo que vio a la empleada enseñar a su hijo. Lo dejó sin palabras. The rain battered the windshield of Javier Morales' sleek black Mercedes as he navigated the winding roads toward his sprawling estate just outside Miami. It was an uncharacteristically early evening for him to be heading home. As a tech mogul whose empire spanned continents, Javier's days were consumed by boardroom battles and late-night strategy sessions. Tonight, though, a canceled investor dinner had left him with a rare window of time, a chance to surprise his 7-year-old son, Mateo, with an impromptu movie night. The thought warmed him, a flicker of light in the storm of his high-stakes life. Little did he know, the night would unveil a moment that would redefine his understanding of wealth. Javier's life was a carefully curated masterpiece of success. At 42, he'd built a fortune from nothing, a Cuban-American kid from Hialeah, who'd turned a knack for coding into a billion-dollar tech firm. But the cost was steep. His marriage had crumbled under the weight of his ambition, and Mateo, his only child, was often left in the care of others. Javier justified it. His wealth ensured Mateo had the best schools, the finest toys, a future without limits. Yet as he pulled into the driveway of his oceanfront mansion, a pang of guilt tugged at him. He couldn't recall the last time he'd tucked his son into bed. Inside, the house was quiet save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and a faint murmur from the kitchen. Javier set his briefcase down, expecting to find Mateo glued to his tablet, engrossed in some game. Instead, he followed the sound of voices, Mateo's high-pitched giggle and the gentle accented cadence of Rosa, their housekeeper. Rosa had been with them for 3 years, a warm, unassuming woman in her 50s who'd immigrated from Guatemala. She was reliable, discreet, and kept the house running like clockwork. Javier appreciated her, though their interactions rarely went beyond polite exchanges. Tonight, though, curiosity drew him closer. He paused at the kitchen doorway, unseen, and peered inside. The sight stopped him cold. Mateo sat at the counter, his small hands clutching a pencil, a worksheet spread before him. Rosa stood beside him, her apron dusted with flour, pointing at the page with a patient smile. "No, pequeño, you carry the one here," she said softly, guiding Mateo through a math problem. But it wasn't the lesson that stole Javier's breath. It was the scene itself. Mateo's eyes sparkled with focus, his usual restlessness replaced by a quiet determination. Rosa's voice, steady and encouraging, seemed to weave a spell of trust between them. Javier felt like an intruder in his own home, witnessing a bond he hadn't known existed. He stepped back, heart pounding, and leaned against the wall, listening. Rosa's voice shifted from math to something deeper. "You see, Mateo, numbers are like people. They all have a place and they all matter, no matter how small they seem." Mateo giggled, asking, "Even the zeros?" Rosa chuckled. "Especially the zeros. They hold everything together quietly without asking for praise." Javier's throat tightened. He'd spent his life chasing the biggest numbers, revenue, stock prices, market shares. Yet here was Rosa, teaching his son to value the unseen, the humble. The conversation took an unexpected turn. "Rosa, why do you always send money to your family?" Mateo asked, his voice curious but innocent. Javier froze, realizing he'd never thought to ask about Rosa's life beyond her role in his household. Her answer came softly, laced with a weight Javier hadn't anticipated. "Because, pequeño, love means giving what you have, even when it's not much. My sister's kids in Guatemala, they need books, medicine, a chance to dream big like you. I send what I can so they know someone believes in them." Mateo's brow furrowed. "But don't you need money, too?" Rosa's laugh was gentle. "I have enough. Happiness isn't in keeping, it's in sharing." Javier's chest ached. He thought of his own childhood, scraping by in a cramped apartment, his mother working double shifts to afford his first computer. He'd clawed his way to success to escape that struggle, to ensure Mateo would never know want. But as he listened, he realized he'd been blind to the lessons his son needed most, not about wealth, but about heart. Rosa, with her modest paycheck and unassuming presence, was teaching Mateo what no private tutor or elite school ever could. He stepped into the kitchen, and both Rosa and Mateo looked up, startled. "Papi!" Mateo cried, leaping from his stool to hug Javier's legs. Rosa's smile faltered, a flicker of worry crossing her face as if she feared she'd overstepped. "Señor Morales, I didn't hear you come in," she said, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. Javier waved off her concern, his voice catching. Rosa, how long have you been helping Mateo with his homework? She hesitated, then admitted, A while, senor. He's a smart boy, just needs someone to sit with him, believe in him. Javier nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. He'd hired tutors, enrolled Mateo in after-school programs, but it was Rosa, unpaid for this, unnoticed, who'd been the steady hand guiding his son. Rosa, he said, his voice thick, why didn't you tell me? She shrugged, her eyes kind but firm. It's not about telling, senor. It's about doing what's needed. That night, after Mateo was tucked into bed, Javier sat in his study, the weight of the evening settling over him. He thought of Rosa's words, happiness isn't in keeping, it's in sharing. He'd built a fortune, but what had he shared with his son? Time, love? The values that had carried his own family through hardship? The realization hit like a tidal wave. His wealth meant nothing if it didn't nurture the people he loved. The next morning, Javier called his assistant and canceled his weekend meetings. He drove Mateo to school himself, listening as his son chattered about Rosa's stories of Guatemala, her lessons about kindness, and even her terrible attempts at drawing dinosaurs. Javier laughed, his heart lighter than it had been in years. When he returned home, he found Rosa in the kitchen preparing lunch. He hesitated, then spoke. Rosa, I want to thank you, not just for the work you do, but for what you're teaching Mateo. It's more than I've given him. Rosa's eyes softened, but she brushed it off. He's a good boy, senor. He just needs to know he's enough. Javier nodded, then added, I want to help your family, Rosa. School fees, medical bills, whatever they need. And I'm setting up a scholarship fund in your name for kids like them. Rosa's hand flew to her mouth, tears brimming. Senor, you don't have to. I do, Javier interrupted. Because you've shown me what matters. Weeks later, Javier stood at a small community center in Hialeah, announcing the Rosa Alvarez Scholarship Fund. Rosa stood beside him, blushing as the crowd applauded. Mateo, clutching her hand, beamed with pride. Javier looked at them, his heart full. He'd spent years chasing millions, but the richest moment of his life was this, seeing his son learn the power of kindness from a woman who gave everything and asked for nothing. As the crowd dispersed, Mateo tugged at Javier's sleeve. Papi, is Rosa a zero? Javier laughed, ruffling his son's hair. She's the biggest number of all, mijo. She holds us together. And in that moment, Javier knew he'd come home early, but what he'd found was timeless. A reminder that true wealth lies in the hearts we touch and the love we share. The rain had stopped, and the Miami sky glowed with possibility. Javier Morales, millionaire, had returned home, not just to his mansion, but to the heart of what mattered most, and he'd never forget the lesson he learned from the woman who quietly changed everything.